Hello and welcome to the MHR Podcast. I'm Andy.
I'm Alice.
And this is the last time we're going to be introducing ourselves in 2023.
Aww.
I know. Well, we set out at the start of the year to make sure that you had an update every week from us about the world of work, whether that's anything HR, payroll, finance, learning, you name it. If it was to do with work, we wanted to give you a weekly update as to what our world was like. And hopefully we could learn what your world was like and share a lot of knowledge along the way. And we've done it.
You have.
Well,
Last man standing.
me and lots of others have made sure that's happened. So, this is episode 50. We're going to take a couple of weeks off now as we get ready for 2024, and we'll see you the other side. So I thought, Alice, no better way to end this year than for us to look back on all the things we discussed, try and pinpoint the kind of key issues and topics that we've learnt about in the world of work this year as a wrap-up, and make some predictions for what we can expect going forwards into January 2024.
Sounds fun.
There's
going to be plenty of topics, isn't there?
Well, there is.
Year?
Well, we've had 50 episodes, and I think I don't know about you, but I found there's been a few reoccurring trends.
Definitely, yes.
Keywords. Lots of technology was discussed in terms of where that's moving and what that means for people.
Yes.
Lots of topics on well-being.
Yeah.
Lots on kind of employee engagement, how we can manage these things.
Oh, that was a very key word, wasn't it? A constant employee engagement.
Absolutely, and so we could talk in the all range of manner of topics in regards to that. And then I think there was a lot to do with just supporting staff to kind of feel a bit more inspired or not to burn out.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of HR heavy topics, but there was a lot of legislation we discussed. We talked about both of the budgets that were announced this year.
Yep.
We've talked about the flexible working bill. We've talked about legislation changes. So actually looking back at the episodes we've done, it's given us a really good view of how the world of work has changed this year.
Definitely.
And also how trends are kind of creeping towards new ways that we can expect in 24.
Yes. Yeah.
So I've pulled out 3 or 4 topics I thought we could highlight as kind of our headlines of 2023.
Great.
First one is AI and tech, or the AI and the use of technology to support people.
Definitely a key topic.
Well, we discussed this in about 3 different ways this year. So do you remember at the start of the year when AI was just a big thing that came out and then everyone didn't understand ChatGPT?
Oh, yeah.
And everyone was scared of it. And don't use it at work. Don't use ChatGPT at work. It's not very good.
Don't create an account.
Yeah, but also it's gonna make us all redundant. And I think we had a couple of us where I was scared I was going to lose my job, right? And then actually, as the environment settled, businesses actually started to make prediction as to how AI would be used in the business and the impact it would have. And that still fueled a load of fears about people losing their jobs or people becoming redundant. And actually, I think we've seen the reverse of that slightly this year. We talked about earlier about an employee. The first AI employee for hire was Avery Ingram AI.
Oh, right.
That companies could hire. And actually, a case study that we shared on an earlier episode said that actually, because they were trying to act like a human, they were booking themselves onto social events or meetings when they couldn't actually be there. So there was some limitations with that. So it made us think, well, okay, we've learned the limitations of AI. I think businesses have a better expectation of what it can do for them. Yeah. And I feel like the narrative has changed more to be about how AI can support your employees rather than replace them. How does it work alongside them to make your employees more efficient?
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
From looking at kind of the predictions we've made going into next year as HR, payroll, finance experts at MHR, what are your takeaways from what to expect for AI?
Well, I've done a bit of digging around to see kind of what was being said at the moment towards the end of the year, what will be learned from AI. Like you say, there's limitations, whereabouts will it be growing, that sort of thing. So for next year, the expectation is that working more closely with other departments, and I guess it's understanding more about it. Like you say, it is new this year. It probably has, we could say, taken the world by storm. But Fisher actually says that the best approach is looking at it as supporting and not replacing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of grasping that idea of it's something new in the world of work. It's something new in our worlds, probably.
Yeah.
Full stop now. But that understanding and learning about it is only going to make us more compatible with using that type of technology. And like I say, it shouldn't be feared. Embracing it, learning about it, seeing how it will impact you, your job, it's there to benefit. And I think that's the thing that probably many companies are trying to understand is how it can benefit not fear from it.
In one of our prediction pieces for next year, actually, our colleague Graham Fisher says, quoted in that roadmap for 2024, that you can't have a human resource department without humans. You'll always need that personal touch.
Yes.
So the point there is reflecting on how does AI support that functionality. It's not there to replace it.
Definitely. Would you say that your views changed from the beginning of the year?
Yeah, obviously, I got tied up with the kind of the mad panic of what does it mean? How are we going to go? Are we going to just cut efficiencies and just do all this? But actually, I've realised that as someone who works in kind of a creative department, there is limitations to stuff like ChatGPT. And what I find really interesting from a marketing point of view is there's a lot of departments that look like that are looking at how they can use it, but know that it's got its limitations.
Oh,
so
right.
like, okay, I'm not going to get ChatGPT to do this. I'm going to get ChatGPT to do something that I can then edit and refine. So it saved me time, but it's not doing the real critical thinking that it's incapable of.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, again, it's a support tool, not a replacement for a resource.
Yeah, and that human touch I think is definitely key. To be fair, it might even be something that crops up a bit next year is personalisation. I know that it's been thrown around a few meetings. I work with customers, and it is kind of that. Like I say, it can build a foundation. I think that's what it's great for. And like I say, there's an efficiency there, but you can't replicate a human touch.
It can take the legwork out of
really.
the task without doing the critical thinking, which you need to do later.
Exactly.
So the second topic that came up again and again and again in our episodes was employee engagement and HR red flags and issues. So we have a lot of fun talking about HR issues because we can talk about like stories where employees have done something wrong, or there's some pitfalls, or maybe there's a night out where people have to like expect a HR meeting the next day, and these two things can typically be quite funny. But I think the real topics that have added value this year when we talked about workforce expectations and how that supports retention.
Right.
We've talked about how personal development is key to the retention.
Very much so, yeah.
But also making sure you get the right value out of your employees, but also how you can create kind of quiet hiring opportunities. So how are you optimizing your staff resource and using that to help retention? Also, how can you recruit a younger generation like Gen Z with their expectations in mind, and how make sure that your values are aligned to what they're looking for from a business. So these are all things we discussed this year.
And I remember this year quite a common thing was talking about the market, isn't it? It was what do they call it? Recruitment market, what do they call it? I'm trying to think.
It's an employees market, isn't it?
That was it. Yeah. Yes, and again, that was very rife, I think, through the later part of this year.
Yeah.
With people chopping and changing jobs, or the redundancies, that sort of thing. But flipping it on the inside of business, it was right. How can we be getting the talent that we need, or how can we retain the talent? I think that was a big thing as well. Wasn't it?
We talked a lot about how software can help that as well, right? Because if it's stupidly competitive, right, and you've got a person who's applying for you for a job, they're also applying for 10 other people. So 10 other places, right? 10 other employers. If you don't have a really slick, clean application process, one, you're going to create a negative opinion of the business and how it works. But two, that's time wasted, because if someone else can get back in touch with them sooner or create a better impression quicker and they can apply easier, they're already on the front foot and you're not. Indeed. So we talked about like how software can help that initial impression of a business.
Yeah, first impressions count, definitely.
So what about next year then? What are we expecting will be the problems for kind of employee engagement going into 2024?
Well, this one I found quite surprising, actually. I found a couple of stats. So the first one I have is supposedly 62% would consider leaving their current job due to insufficient learning opportunities.
Okay, that's a high stat actually, isn't it?
I would say it's very high, 62%.
So there's an onus on development and learning. So like the ability to feel like you can grow with an organisation.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And again, that could be that they're not, if they're looking at learning opportunities, you're probably thinking it could be in their current role, or they might want to learn about how to extend their role into different areas, maybe different industries, that sort of thing. So it's probably, like you say, understanding your employees and where they're wanting to go, their ambitions, their goals. Second one, 80% of workforce don't sit behind a desk to do their job. So that idea is, again, learning and development. It's not relying on but traditional learning approaches for office-based employees. Widening the horizons, think about the employees that work at home or might be working in different areas around the country. We don't have a traditional workforce anymore, to say that. So, 80%. of the workforce do not sit behind the desk.
And I suppose that leans into the point where we're talking about a lot as an organisation, especially when we're talking about like software for HR and learning, is learning experience is the next generation of learning, right? So we talk a lot about what we can expect next year in terms of an LXP, a learning experience platform, right?
Yes, yep. And with that, like I say, we talk about a platform, we look at different technologies. But you've got to come down to the fact of what works for your business. How is that going to be delivered? How frequently? How is it managed? What type of resources do you have on there? But again, a lot of employees look for their self-direct on their own learning. So again, taking it into their own career path and where they want to lead it to. But at the end of the day, it pinpoints on focusing on what your employees need.
And also how you can, like say, how you can take control of your own development using that platform, right? There's a kind of a little snippet here from some of our predictions for next year, but an expanded perspective on learn and development. LXP is starting to become a more known term, as well as a new priority to the mainstream of organisations, and that's from our senior learning product manager here at MHR. So it will likely become a big thing going into the new year.
So that just goes through, doesn't it?
Businesses are wanting to get behind LXP as a platform to drive your own learning and give employees a better experience, which we can see, according to our stats, would help retention, right?
Yeah, indeed.
So then, moving on to our next topic, we talked about this loads, actually, way more than I thought we would at the start of the year. We talked about well-being, and we always talk about well-being because it's a very HR topic. How do we keep people engaged? How do we keep them developed? We're also looking at hard years. We've come off, a podcast for 2 years where we've talked about COVID and all these other things where people are feeling under pressure. So well-being is always top of mind, but financial well-being has been a key topic for 2023, especially when we've had things like cost of living crisis come out, lots of budgets have been announced, and we're all starting to feel like there is an increased demand on from employees to make sure that their organisation can support them with their own financial well-being, which wasn't something that was typically expected maybe a few years ago. Now it's almost an expectance that if I work for you, not only are you going to pay me, but you're going to give me services and support to support my financial well-being.
It is an interesting one, isn't it? 'Cause like you say, it's something that probably didn't even cross our minds a few years ago. And it's almost now at the forefront because, like you say, it's almost upcoming, I would say, more and more financial wellbeing. I know we've certainly talked about it a lot, or you have in podcasts. And I think it's now grasping that knowledge of how broad financial wellbeing can be and how many ways it can be delivered and different ways of supporting. But again, I think it's because more and more jobs probably aren't the typical 9 to 5 as well. And
one of the big headlines, obviously, if you're looking at financial well-being, is looking at flexible pay. So we talk about here at MHR, lots of other people are talking about it too, but it's about realizing that if you can have software or services that enable your employees to access flexible pay or better sight of their pay data, that's more live, it's more up to date, it's more kind of as you earn, you can see, employees can take better control of their own financial decisions and have a bit more flexibility and financial freedom. So flexible pay is a huge topic, and I imagine it's going to remain a big one as more businesses adopt that viewpoint into 2024.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you've got noted here actually is that financial well-being doesn't need to be a costly, large strategic shift. And I think that's quite a key thing to pick up on is the idea that payroll, it can be moved now to reflect more flexibility, like the workforces with their, gig workers. I think that's quite a big thing now in the market. But looking at that financial well-being not needing to be costly, large strategic shift, it's true. At the end of the day, probably a lot of resources and knowledge is already there. It's just grasping it and delivering it in a way that's accessible and that employees are aware of it. And obviously that falls under the realm of HR.
So that's it. I think that's our main topics that we discussed in the podcast. So I think to summarise, looking back at AI and tech and the idea of we're replacing humans, actually, no, we want to support humans. Looking at well-being, looking at learning, looking at employee engagement, all of this seems to come back to kind of one major point that I think is a focus, which is retention. Right? Retention is the name of the game. As we move into 2024, right? AI isn't at the stage where we can just plug in and go and fill talent gaps, right? It's got to support people to make their jobs easier, to make them feel more fulfilled. So embracing digital transformation is absolutely key. And I think ultimately, here's the big plug at the end of a 50-year presentation from our podcast. That's how we help, right? That's how companies like MHR helps.
Yes.
We supply that software, we supply those services to make sure that you can retain your employees better, that they've got a better financial flexibility,
Indeed.
that they've got more sureties, HR processes, and we're removing the burden from their shoulders, right?
Yes.
So, if you want to find out more about the topics that we've discussed all year, because it's clear that it's affecting all businesses as it's been in the news, do make sure you go onto the MHR website and you have a look at our 2024 roadmap guide. It talks about all these topics and a lot more than what we can discuss in this podcast, but it will help you get ahead of the picture for next year and what you can expect, and it will help you kind of start to plan towards how you're going to deal with those big issues that are going to come into next year, because it's something we've predicted. It looks like it's something where the market is going. So download it. It's free. It's there for you to use, and hopefully it will provide you with a bit more insights to what you can expect, because we've been waffling about it for 50 weeks and we weren't wrong. It has happened.
True. We'll see what happens next year.
Exactly, right? We might be saying something completely different. I think that's it, Alice. I feel like we've wrapped up the year quite well.
I think so. How does it feel? End of 2023?
I feel a lot older, but I'm glad we've done this. I think this has been a fantastic thing to do, to make sure that both our customers, but also everyone in our network has been able to learn as we've learned about how the world of work has worked.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to doing this again next year.
Yes.
So if you have followed the MHR podcast this year, we thank you, not just from myself, not just from Alice, but from Emma as well, and also our production team, so Lee, Jamie, and assistant producer Tom. We thank you, and we're looking forward to seeing you next year as we continue to do whatever we're doing to make sure that you understand what's coming out in regards to legislation changes, in regards to the world of work, HR issues, payroll issues, finance and learning. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a great new year and a great holiday.
Merry Christmas. See you next year. Bye-bye.